The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched impossibly high, refracting light from a dozen different suns. Ambassador James Wright stood at the podium, his simple grey suit a stark contrast to the elaborate forms surrounding him. His heart pounded, but his face remained calm. This was humanity's moment. The Council will now hear testimony regarding the human species application for membership, announced the speaker, a floating mass of bioluminescent tendrils that pulsed with each word. James looked around the massive chamber. Hundreds of alien species filled the observation decks. Some floated, some stood on multiple legs, others seemed to exist as pure energy contained in force fields. But his attention focused on two particular groups. To his left sat the Verdani delegation. They were tall and willowy, their skin a deep green that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. They sustained themselves entirely on plant matter, absorbing nutrients through both digestion and a form of photosynthesis. Their representative, Elder Thornwick, regarded James with large, gentle eyes that held ancient wisdom. To his right lounged the Kresh. They were the opposite of the Verdani in every way. Muscular and powerful, with sharp claws and rows of gleaming teeth designed for tearing flesh. They were pure predators, evolved over millions of years to hunt and consume meat. Their war leader, a scarred veteran named Bloodclaw, watched James with the focused intensity of a hunter sizing up prey. "We have reviewed your biological data," Elder Thornwick began, his voice soft like wind through leaves. "Your species is confusing to us. Your digestive system processes plant cellulose, yet you also possess canine teeth designed for tearing meat." Bloodclaw leaned forward, his claws clicking against the metal armrest. "A genetic defect, surely. No evolved species maintains both hunting adaptations and grazing capability. Evolution eliminates such inefficiency. You must be one or the other." James took a deep breath. This was the moment he had prepared for. Actually, humans are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. We have for millions of years. Complete silence filled the chamber. Even the ambient hum of the station's systems seemed to fade away. A crystalline being from the observation deck spoke up, its voice chiming like breaking glass. "Impossible. Specialization is the mark of evolutionary success. Every species in this council has perfected a single dietary pathway. The Verdani have mastered the consumption of plant life. The Kresh are apex predators. The lithoids absorb minerals. The Gessarians filter atmospheric compounds. This is how advanced civilizations evolve." "Perhaps," James replied carefully, choosing his words with precision. "But humanity thrives on diversity, including in our diet. We can survive in environments where only plants grow, and we can survive in frozen wastelands where only animals exist. We adapt." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some aliens seemed intrigued, but most appeared disturbed by this revelation. The speaker's tendrils flickered rapidly. The council must deliberate on this unusual claim. However, such primitive adaptability concerns us. A species that has not specialized may lack the focus necessary for advanced civilization. "We propose a trial period," Bloodclaw announced, standing to his full imposing height. "There is a world called Tarsize 7. A frontier planet where both herbivore and carnivore colonies have struggled to establish permanent settlements. If the humans can survive there, perhaps there is merit to this omnivore claim." Elder Thornwick nodded slowly. "My people established agricultural facilities there 3 cycles ago. Despite our advanced farming techniques, we barely sustain ourselves. We require constant supply shipments from our homeworld. The soil is difficult, and the native plant life is toxic to us. And my warriors have established a hunting outpost," Bloodclaw added with a predatory grin. "We hunt the great beasts that roam the plains. But the prey is scarce and dangerous. We have lost many warriors. Even for the Kresh, Tarsize 7 is a harsh mistress." James felt the weight of Earth's future pressing down on his shoulders. Billions of humans waited for news of this meeting. Their hopes for joining the galactic community rested on his decision right now. This was clearly a test designed by aliens who expected humanity to fail. They wanted to prove that specialized species were superior. But James also understood something the Council did not. Humanity had survived ice ages and droughts. They had thrived in deserts and jungles, on mountains and islands. Humans had spread across an entire planet precisely because they could eat almost anything and adapt to almost anywhere. "We accept your challenge," James said firmly, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. The speaker's tendrils pulsed with what might have been surprise. "You understand the terms? You will establish a colony on Tarsize 7. You will receive no special assistance beyond basic survival supplies. If you survive one complete solar cycle of that world, we shall reconsider your application for council membership. If you fail, humanity will be deemed too primitive for galactic society. We understand, James replied. And we will succeed. As the session adjourned, Elder Thornwick approached James cautiously. The tall Verdani moved with grace, like a tree bending in the wind. I do not wish ill upon your people, Ambassador Wright, he said quietly, his large eyes filled with genuine concern. But you must understand. Tarsi's 7 breaks the strongest of us. We Verdani are peaceful farmers who have cultivated plants for 10,000 years, yet that world defeats us. The Kresh are the finest hunters in the galaxy, yet even they cannot tame it. A species caught between both worlds, master of neither, will surely perish there. James extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship that he had taught the Verdani earlier. Perhaps, Elder Thornwick. Or perhaps being caught between two worlds is exactly where humanity thrives best. They shook hands, and James turned to leave the chamber. He had a message to send to Earth. Humanity was going to Tarsi's 7, and they were going to prove that adaptability was not a weakness. It was their greatest strength. 3 months later, the human colony ship Endeavour broke through the purple clouds of Tarsi's 7. Captain Robert Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the planet's surface come into view. His crew had trained for this moment, but nothing could fully prepare them for what they saw below. The planet was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Massive forests of purple and red vegetation stretched across entire continents. Mountain ranges taller than anything on Earth pierced the sky. And moving across the plains were creatures so enormous that they looked like mountains themselves, slowly grazing on the alien grass. Captain, sensors are picking up the Verdani settlement to the east, Lieutenant Emma Clark reported from her station. And the Kresh outpost is west of our planned landing zone. Robert nodded. Set us down right between them. In that river valley. The Endeavour descended smoothly, its engines kicking up clouds of purple dust. Within an hour, human boots touched the soil of Tarsi's 7 for the first time. The air smelled strange, like copper mixed with something sweet. The gravity felt almost exactly like Earth, but everything else was alien. Dr. Michael Foster, the colony's chief botanist, was the first to kneel down and examine the soil. He ran it through his fingers, then pulled out a portable analysis device. Captain, this is interesting. The soil has potential, but it is very different from Earth. We will need to work on it. Can we grow crops? Robert asked. Maybe. With time and effort, Michael replied, already making notes on his tablet. Colonel David Bennett, head of security, approached with a grim expression. Captain, we have got eyes on us. I can see observation drones from both the Verdani and Kresh settlements. They are watching everything we do. Let them watch, Robert said calmly. Emma, send a message to both settlements. Tell them we would welcome any advice about surviving on this world. Over the next few days, the human colony took shape rapidly. Engineers assembled prefabricated buildings. Scientists collected samples of soil, water, and native plants. Security teams mapped the surrounding area and identified potential threats. Everyone worked with the efficiency that humans had perfected over centuries of colonization on Earth. On the 4th day, a response came from the Verdani settlement. Elder Thornwick himself arrived in a sleek transport vehicle, accompanied by several agricultural specialists. Robert and Michael met them at the colony entrance. Ambassador Wright spoke highly of human determination, Thornwick said, his voice gentle. I come to offer what help I can, though I fear it will not be enough. He led them to a viewing screen and showed them images of the Verdani settlement. It looked more like a fortress than a farm. Massive energy barriers surrounded fields of carefully controlled crops. Hydroponic towers reached toward the sky, sealed away from the native environment. We have been here 3 years, Thornwick explained sadly. We import 70% of our food from our home world. The native soil rejects our crops. The weather patterns are unpredictable. Native insects destroy our plants. We survive, but we do not thrive. Michael studied the images carefully. You grow only Verdani crops. Of course. They are what we eat. What else would we grow? What about native plants? Michael asked. Have you tried cultivating them? Thornwick looked confused. But they are toxic to us. We cannot eat them. Maybe not, Michael said slowly, an idea forming. But what if we could grow native plants alongside Earth crops? The native plants might improve the soil, protect against insects, or stabilize the weather effects on our fields. But you could not eat them, Thornwick repeated. We do not have to eat everything we grow, Michael smiled. Sometimes plants help other plants grow better. On Earth, we call it companion planting. Thornwick's large eyes widened. This is a concept we have not considered. We only grow what we consume. That same afternoon, a very different visitor arrived. Bloodclaw, the HFY War leader, came on foot with two of his warriors. They carried weapons that looked deadly and well used. Colonel Bennett met them with his security team. Human warriors, Bloodclaw growled, his sharp teeth visible. I come to see if you are hunters or prey. David straightened, meeting the larger alien's gaze without flinching. We are survivors. That makes us whatever we need to be. Bloodclaw seemed impressed. Come. I will show you what you face. He led David and a team of human soldiers to the edge of the plain. There, grazing in the distance, was a herd of six-legged creatures. Each one was the size of an elephant, with thick armored hide and massive horns. We call them thunder beasts, Bloodclaw explained. They are good eating, but dangerous. It takes 20 HFY warriors to bring down one safely. We lose 2 or 3 warriors each hunt. The population is too small to support our needs. We must import most of our meat from off-world. David watched the creatures carefully. What about smaller prey? Do you hunt anything else? Bloodclaw snorted dismissively. There are smaller creatures in the forests and rivers. But they are beneath the HFY. We are apex predators. We hunt only the greatest prey. So there is food in the forests and rivers that nobody hunts? David asked, glancing at his team. Scavenger food, Bloodclaw said with disgust. Not worthy of warriors. David smiled. Humans eat fish from rivers. We hunt small game in forests. We are not too proud to take what the land offers. That evening, Robert called a colony meeting. Everyone gathered in the main assembly hall, tired from days of hard work but eager to hear the plan. I have good news, Robert announced. This world has everything we need. The Verdani have been trying to farm using only their methods. The HFY have been trying to hunt using only their traditions. Both are failing because they are specialists. He pulled up a holographic map of the surrounding area. But we are omnivores. We are going to do both. Michael, your team will start farming. Use Thornwick's advice, but do not be afraid to experiment. Plant earth crops and native plants together. See what works. David, your team will start hunting and fishing. Use Bloodclaw's knowledge about the thunder beasts, but do not ignore the smaller prey. We will take what this world gives us. Within 6 months, I want this colony producing 50% of our own food. Within a year, I want us completely self-sufficient. Emma raised her hand. Captain, that is far more ambitious than what either the Verdani or HFY have achieved. Robert grinned. Exactly. Because we are not limited like they are. We can farm and hunt. We can adapt and change. That is what makes us human. The colony erupted in determined cheers. They had come to Tarsize 7 to prove humanity belonged in the galaxy. Now the real work would begin. 8 months had passed since the human colony landed on Tarsize 7. The transformation was remarkable. Fields of earth wheat and corn grew alongside native purple grain. Greenhouses produced vegetables while outdoor plots experimented with hybrid farming techniques. Hunting teams returned daily with fish from the rivers and small game from the forests. The colony had achieved what seemed impossible, they were thriving. Michael stood in the main agricultural field, checking his crops. Beside him, Elder Thornwick examined the plants with wonder in his large eyes. I still do not understand how this works, Thornwick said softly. You grow plants you cannot eat alongside plants you can. The native plants should compete with your crops, yet instead they seem to help them. On Earth, we learned that diversity makes everything stronger, Michael explained, pulling a ripe ear of corn from a stalk. These native plants fix nitrogen in the soil. They attract insects that eat the pests that would destroy our wheat. Nature works better when different things work together. Thornwick reached out tentatively to touch the corn. My people have farmed for 10,000 years, yet we never considered this approach. We believed in purity. Single crops, perfectly controlled. Sometimes survival requires mixing things up, Michael smiled. Across the colony, David and his hunting team returned from the forest. They carried several medium-sized creatures that looked like a cross between a deer and a lizard. Bloodclaw waited at the gate, his massive arms crossed. More small prey, the HFY War leader observed with obvious disdain. Still you refuse to hunt with honor. David set down his catch. We caught enough to feed 50 people today. How many thunder beasts did your warriors bring down this week? Bloodclaw's expression darkened. 1. And we lost a warrior in the process. But it was a glorious hunt. Glory does not fill empty stomachs, David replied, not unkindly. We also set fishing nets in the river. Tomorrow we will have even more food with zero risk to our people. This is not the Kresh way, Bloodclaw growled, but there was something in his voice. Doubt perhaps, or curiosity. That evening, as the colony enjoyed a meal of grilled fish, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread, an emergency alert sounded across the planet. Captain Robert rushed to the communications center where Emma was monitoring incoming transmissions. Captain, we are receiving priority alpha messages from the Galactic Council, Emma said, her face pale. There has been a solar event. A massive flare from the system's primary star. It is disrupting communications and transport across multiple sectors. Robert felt his blood run cold. What does that mean for supply ships? All supply routes are suspended indefinitely. Could be weeks, could be months before normal transport resumes. Within hours, the full scale of the crisis became clear. The solar flare had sent electromagnetic pulses across half the galaxy. Ships could not navigate safely. Communication was spotty at best. And most critically, food transport had stopped completely. The Verdani settlement sent an urgent message. Their supplies would last 3 weeks, maybe 4 if they rationed strictly. After that, they would starve. Their controlled crops could not produce enough food to sustain them. The Kresh outpost was in even worse shape. Carnivores required massive amounts of protein. Their stored meat would last 2 weeks at most. The Thunder Beast population was too small to sustain them without supply ships. Robert called an emergency meeting with both settlements. Elder Thornwick arrived looking frightened. Bloodclaw came looking angry. My people are dying, Thornwick said quietly. Our crops cannot sustain us alone. We have always depended on imports for 60% of our nutrition. Without those ships, we will not survive. The Kresh do not beg, Bloodclaw snarled. But I will speak truth. We need meat. More than this world can provide through hunting thunder beasts alone. My warriors grow weak already. Robert looked at both leaders carefully. The human colony is self-sufficient. We have surplus food. We can help both of you, but you have to be willing to try something different. What do you mean? Thornwick asked. Elder Thornwick, your people eat only plants. But you are starving while forests full of edible vegetation surround you. The native plants are toxic to Verdani biology, yes, but our botanists have identified several species that could be processed to remove the toxins. You would need to adapt your digestion slightly, but it is possible. Thornwick looked horrified. Eat native plants? This goes against everything we believe. Purity of diet is sacred to the Verdani. Sacred does not matter if you are dead, Robert said bluntly. He turned to Bloodclaw. And you? Your warriors are starving because you only hunt the biggest prey. But the rivers are full of fish. The forests are full of smaller animals. You call it scavenger food, but it is protein. It will keep your people alive. The Kresh are apex predators, Bloodclaw roared. We do not eat like prey animals. Then you will die like proud fools, David interjected, standing to face the larger alien. On Earth, humans survived ice ages by eating whatever we could find. Berries, roots, insects, fish, large game, small game. We did not let pride kill us. The room fell silent. Finally, Thornwick spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What would we need to do? Over the next week, something unprecedented happened on Tarsize 7. Michael and his team taught Verdani farmers how to harvest and process native plants. They showed them companion planting techniques. They demonstrated how mixing different food sources created more nutrition than single crops ever could. David took Kresh warriors into the forests and taught them to fish with nets and lines. He showed them how to track and hunt smaller prey efficiently. At first, the proud warriors were insulted. But hunger is a powerful teacher. Bloodclaw himself went on a fishing expedition. He stood in the river, looking ridiculous with a net in his clawed hands. David stood beside him, demonstrating the technique. This is humiliating, Bloodclaw muttered. This is survival, David replied. Cast the net like I showed you. Bloodclaw threw the net awkwardly. It tangled. He snarled in frustration. But on the third attempt, he caught 2 large fish. He stared at them in surprise. It worked, he said, almost to himself. Small victories, David smiled. Now imagine doing this every day. Imagine teaching your warriors. You will never go hungry again. 6 weeks after the solar flare, supply ships finally resumed operations. By then, something remarkable had occurred. The Verdani settlement had reduced their dependence on imports from 60% to 30%. They were eating native plants processed through human techniques. Their population was not just surviving, they were healthier than before. The Kresh outpost had discovered that fishing and hunting small game actually provided more consistent nutrition than their dangerous thunder beast hunts. They had lost no warriors in 6 weeks. Their food stores were full for the first time in years. When the council sent observers to check on the colonies, they found something that shocked them. 3 different species, each with completely different dietary needs, working together and thriving. Elder Thornwick stood with Robert at the colony's edge, watching the sun set over the fields. 2 years had passed since the famine crisis. The colonies on Tarsize 7 had grown closer than anyone thought possible. Verdani farmers worked alongside human agriculturalists. Kresh hunters trained with human security teams. The 3 species had learned to share knowledge, resources, and even meals, though each species still maintained their primary dietary preferences. Robert had been promoted to regional administrator. The success on Tarsize 7 had made him something of a legend in the frontier sectors. He was reviewing supply reports when Emma burst into his office, her face white with fear. "Captain, we have incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency priority. It is bad." The holographic display activated, showing the council speaker. The usually calm bioluminescent being pulsed erratically with agitation. "Administrator Hayes, the galaxy faces an unprecedented threat. An unknown hostile force has invaded the Outer Rim territories. We call them the Devourers. They consume all biological matter in their path. Entire worlds have gone silent. We are mobilizing a defensive fleet, but we need every able colony to prepare for potential evacuation or siege." The transmission ended abruptly. Robert stared at the empty display, his mind racing. He immediately called an emergency meeting with Thornwick and Bloodclaw. "The Devourers move fast," Bloodclaw explained, pulling up tactical data his people had received. "They attacked a Kresh mining colony in the Outer Reach. 4,000 warriors defended that world. None survived. The planet is now a barren rock." Thornwick's hands trembled. A Verdani agricultural world was hit 3 days ago. Population of 2 million. We received only minutes of distress calls before silence. The Devourers stripped everything. Plants, soil, even the microorganisms in the water. "How long before they reach us?" Robert asked. "Weeks. Maybe a month if we are fortunate," Bloodclaw replied grimly. Robert looked at both leaders. "We need to prepare for a siege. If supply lines are cut, we need to survive on what we have here." "The human colony can manage," Emma said. "We are already self-sufficient. But what about everyone else?" Over the next 2 weeks, frantic preparations began. The 3 colonies had been separate but cooperative. Now they had to become truly unified. Defense barriers were extended to protect all settlements. Supply depots were consolidated. Military forces trained together. Then the Galactic Council sent another transmission. They were forming mixed-species military units and deploying them throughout threatened sectors. They specifically requested human personnel for these units. "Why humans?" Thornwick asked, confused. "Because we adapt," David answered. He had been promoted to major and was now commanding the combined security forces on Tarsize 7. The Council finally understands. In war, flexibility keeps you alive. Major David Bennett was assigned to lead a mixed-species unit defending the supply depot on Station Gamma 9, a critical waypoint for military resources. His unit consisted of 30 humans, 40 Kresh warriors, and 20 Verdani support personnel. The Kresh warriors were skeptical at first. "We follow a human commander," one snarled. "We are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." "Then prove it by keeping everyone alive," David replied calmly. "In this unit, we fight smart, not just hard." Station Gamma 9 was a massive orbital platform that stored food, medical supplies, weapons, and fuel for the entire sector. If it fell, dozens of worlds would be cut off from support. The Devourers arrived on the 6th week. They came in a swarm of organic ships that looked like they were grown rather than built. They moved with horrifying coordination, attacking the station's defenses with relentless efficiency. "All personnel to battle stations," David commanded. "Remember your training. We hold this station no matter what." The battle was brutal. Devourer forces breached the outer hull within hours. They were unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced before. Part insect, part machine, they adapted to every tactic used against them. The Kresh warriors fought with savage courage, but their strength alone was not enough. The Devourers adapted to their straightforward attack patterns quickly. The Verdani support staff maintained weapons and supplies efficiently, but they were not warriors. They panicked when fighting reached their sections. It was the humans who made the difference. When frontal assaults failed, they used guerrilla tactics. When Devourers adapted to one strategy, humans switched to another. They fought with rifles, then knives, then improvised weapons made from station materials. Sergeant Thomas Reed led a squad that held the main supply depot for 3 days straight. When ammunition ran low, they used fire. When the fire suppression systems activated, they used electrical traps. When power failed, they fought in darkness using night vision gear the Kresh could not use. How do you keep changing tactics? A Kresh warrior asked Thomas during a brief respite. Because staying still gets you killed, Thomas replied, checking his weapon. Humans learned that lesson thousands of years ago. The siege lasted 7 weeks. It was the longest any station had held against the Devourers. Other stations fell within days, but Gamma 9 endured. The turning point came when David realized something crucial. The Devourers consumed biological matter, but they also needed it continuously. They were like a fire that needed constant fuel. They are starving, David announced during a command meeting. Every day we hold costs them resources. They cannot adapt if they do not have energy. He implemented a new strategy. Instead of trying to kill every devourer, they focused on protecting the food supplies and denying the enemy any biological material to consume. They burned their own dead rather than let the devourers consume them. They sealed off sections with organic material and flooded them with radiation. The Kresh thought it was cowardly. We should attack them directly. Attack with what? David challenged. We have lost half our warriors. But we still have the supplies. If we keep those supplies safe, reinforcements will come. If we waste our remaining forces on glorious charges, everyone dies. Bloodclaw, who had arrived with reinforcements mid-siege, watched the human tactics with growing respect. This is not how the Kresh fight. But I see the wisdom. You sacrifice pride for survival. Pride does not matter if you lose, David said simply. On the 51st day, the Galactic Defense Fleet arrived. Fresh ships with full weapons and supplies drove the Devourers away from Station Gamma 9. Of the 90 personnel in David's original unit, 43 survived. But the station and its critical supplies remained intact. The Council was astounded. Every other station in the sector had fallen within days. Gamma 9 had held for 7 weeks against impossible odds. Admiral Kestrith, a high-ranking Verdani military commander, came personally to inspect the station. He walked through the damaged corridors with David, observing the improvised defenses and unconventional tactics everywhere. I have commanded fleets for 30 years, Kestrith said quietly. I have studied warfare across 1,000 battles. But I have never seen anything like this. You changed tactics daily, sometimes hourly. You used weapons we never would have considered. You adapted constantly. That is what humans do, David replied, exhausted but proud. We survive. The Council wants human advisors embedded in every major military unit, Kestrith continued. Not to command, but to teach this flexibility. Will you help us? David looked at the Kresh warriors resting nearby, eating ration packs they once would have considered beneath them. He saw Verdani technicians who had learned to fight when necessary. He saw humans who had led by example. We will help, David agreed. But not just humans teaching others. Everyone teaching everyone. The Kresh have strength. The Verdani have discipline. Humans have adaptability. Together we are stronger than any one species alone. News of the defense of Gamma 9 spread across the galaxy. The Devourers were eventually pushed back through a combination of military might and the new adaptive tactics. But everyone knew the truth. Humanity's flexibility had saved not just one station, but had provided the key to defending against an enemy that adapted to everything. Back on Tarsize 7, Robert received a formal communication from the Galactic Council. It was brief and unprecedented. Humanity has proven its worth beyond question. Full membership in the Council is granted immediately. Furthermore, we request human advisors throughout our military and civilian infrastructure. Your adaptability is no longer seen as primitive. It is recognized as advanced evolutionary strategy. Robert smiled and looked out over the colony where 3 species now lived and worked in genuine partnership. The impossible colony had become a model for the entire galaxy. 5 years had passed since the Devourer War ended. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. James Wright stood once again in the Galactic Council chamber, but this time everything was different. He was no longer a nervous ambassador hoping for acceptance. He was now Earth's senior representative, and humanity had earned its place among the stars. The chamber itself had changed too. Where once species sat in separate sections divided by their nature, now the seating was mixed. Verdani sat beside Kresh. Humans worked alongside crystalline lithoids. The rigid divisions that had defined galactic society for thousands of years were dissolving. The council recognizes senior representative Wright, the speaker announced, its tendrils pulsing with warm colors. James stood and approached the central podium. Thank you, speaker. I come today not to ask for anything, but to celebrate what we have all achieved together. He activated a holographic display showing statistics from across the galaxy. 5 years ago, 70% of Verdani colonies depended on constant food imports. Today, that number is down to 20%. Verdani agricultural specialists have learned to incorporate native plants and companion planting techniques. Starvation, once a constant threat during supply disruptions, has become rare. The Verdani delegation nodded approvingly. Elder Thornwick, now much older but still sharp, smiled with pride. Similarly, Kresh hunting outposts that once struggled to sustain themselves are now thriving. By expanding their prey selection and learning sustainable harvesting techniques, Kresh colonies have reduced their dependence on imports from 80% to 30%. Bloodclaw stood from his seat. The massive warrior had scars from the Devourer War, but also something new in his eyes. Wisdom perhaps, earned through hard experience. The Kresh were proud, Bloodclaw announced to the chamber. We believed our way was superior. We hunted only the greatest prey because we thought smaller prey was beneath us. But pride fills no bellies. Humans taught us that survival requires flexibility, not stubbornness. Today, young Kresh warriors learn fishing and tracking of all prey sizes. We are stronger for it. The chamber erupted in approving sounds, each species expressing agreement in their own way. James continued. But this is not just about food. The real change is philosophical. For millions of years, galactic civilization believed specialization was the pinnacle of evolution. Each species perfected one thing and depended on others for everything else. This created a fragile system. He pulled up images of stations destroyed during the Devourer War. When crisis came, specialists struggled. Carnivores starved when meat supplies were cut. Herbivores died when plant shipments stopped. Military forces using rigid tactics were defeated quickly. Humanity brought a different approach. Not because we are superior, but because our biology forced us to learn adaptability. We eat plants and meat. We live in deserts and tundras. We fight with strength when needed and cunning when required. We are generalists in a galaxy of specialists. A voice called out from the observation deck. It was Admiral Kestrith, the Verdani military commander. And you taught us that being a generalist is not primitive. It is advanced. My fleet now trains in 12 different combat styles instead of 3. We lost fewer ships in the last border skirmish than we would have lost 5 years ago because we could adapt to enemy tactics. Another voice joined in. A young Kresh named Sharpclaw, who had served under Major Bennett during the war. Human commanders taught us that there is honor in survival, not just in glorious death. My unit practices what we call the human method. We plan for 3 different strategies before every mission. If Plan 1 fails, we have Plan 2 ready. If Plan 2 fails, Plan 3. We no longer charge blindly forward. James felt emotion welling up but maintained his composure. The council established what we call adaptability protocols. These are not just military tactics. They are guidelines for civilization. The speaker's tendrils brightened. Indeed. And the results have been remarkable. We have opened the Galactic Academy on Earth, where young people from every species learn human philosophy alongside their own traditions. Students learn to think flexibly, to consider multiple solutions to problems, and to work across species boundaries. James nodded. 20,000 students from 40 species currently study on Earth. They learn our history, how humans survived ice ages and droughts, wars and plagues, by adapting constantly. But they also teach us. Humans are learning Verdani patience and Kresh courage. We are all becoming more than we were. A holographic display showed construction projects across the galaxy. Space stations designed with mixed environments. Colony worlds where multiple species live together, each contributing their strengths. Research facilities studying omnivorous evolution not just in diet but in thinking. Some species are even pursuing biological modifications, James continued, bringing up scientific data. The lithoids, who absorb only minerals, have begun genetic research into expanding their consumption capabilities. It will take generations, but they want their children to have more options. Elder Thornwick stood slowly, his aged body supported by a mobility device. I am old now. I remember when humans first came to Tar-Size 7. I thought they would fail. I thought their inability to specialize would doom them. But I was wrong about everything. His voice grew stronger. My granddaughter is studying at the Earth Academy. She sends me messages about concepts that never existed in Vedani philosophy. Flexibility. Improvisation. Thinking outside established patterns. She is learning to be more than just Vedani. She is learning to be adaptable. And she is not alone, Bloodclaw added. My son trains with human soldiers. He learns fishing and farming alongside combat. Things I would have considered shameful 5 years ago. Now I see them as essential survival skills. He will be a better warrior than I ever was, not because he is stronger, but because he has more tools to draw upon. James looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species. We call this the evolution of understanding. Not biological evolution, but philosophical evolution. The galaxy is learning that the future belongs not to those who do one thing perfectly, but to those who can do many things adequately and switch between them as needed. The speaker floated to the center of the chamber. The Council has voted unanimously on a proposal. We are establishing the Frontier Exploration Initiative. Mixed species teams will explore uncharted space together. Humans will lead these expeditions, not because you are superior, but because your adaptability makes you ideal guides into the unknown. James felt pride swell in his chest. Earth accepts this honor. But I want to be clear about something. This is not about humans teaching everyone else. This is about all of us learning from each other. Humans have much to learn from every species here. 6 months later, the first mixed expedition launched from Earth orbit. The ship was called Unity, and its crew was unprecedented. 50 humans, 30 Vedani, 20 Kresh, and representatives from a dozen other species. They were heading into unexplored space beyond the galactic rim. Captain Robert Hayes, now promoted to fleet captain, commanded the Unity. Standing on the bridge with him were his old friends. Michael Foster as Chief Science Officer. Emma Clark as Navigation Chief. David Bennett as Security Commander. And alongside them, Thornwick's granddaughter serving as Agricultural Specialist, and Bloodclaw's son leading a squad of mixed-species soldiers. All stations report ready, Emma announced. Then let us see what is out there, Robert said with a smile. Engage engines. As the Unity jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving known space behind, the crew gathered in the main dining hall for a traditional departure meal. It was a custom humans had introduced, and other species had embraced. The table was filled with foods from a dozen worlds. Vedani vegetables grown in new ways. Kresh meat prepared with human spices. Earth bread shared with crystal formations for lithoid crew members. Everyone eating together, each species enjoying their preferred foods but also trying small portions of others. Robert stood and raised his glass. To adaptability. To flexibility. To learning from each other. And to the future we are building together. To the future, everyone echoed, each in their own language, but all understanding the same message. The galaxy had learned what humans had always known. Survival belongs to those who can change. Strength comes from diversity. And the species caught between two worlds, unable to be perfectly specialized, might just be perfectly suited for an unpredictable universe. As the Unity sailed into the unknown, carrying the hope of a changed galaxy, one truth had become undeniable. Humans were omnivores, yes. But more importantly, they had taught the galaxy to be omnivorous in thinking, in tactics, in philosophy, and in dreams. The age of rigid specialization was over. The age of adaptation had begun.